I just want to talk about Boney injuries because I've become more and more aware of young bowlers having bony injuries, back injuries in particular. And I'm going to talk about my experience. Sat at home desks, so yeah. Um, I'm going to talk about my experience. So I've been working with a small number, and it's only ever going to be a small number of young pace bowlers, young cricketers, some of which are all-rounders, for a while now, and I've loved it. I started doing this when I was working with Warwickshire. In fact, it started before that. And these young cricketers are progressing. They're progressing nicely, and they're getting opportunities. They're getting selected. They're doing all this, that, and the other. And it's really fascinating to me because I honestly believe that when you are working with young pace bowlers, there needs to be certain amount of communication. So I've got, workloads. I look after bowlers as though it's a county academy program, because I don't know any other way other than that, and also the way that I've worked with bowlers at pro level, and that's what I deliver to people. So I've got all this kind of library of information there, footage. Um, what they're working on technically, tactically, physically, mentally, lifestyle. I've got all these programs that would be really useful information and context. Um, the recent Bunbury Festival, I am aware that there have been a number of injuries, and it's really interesting. Bony injuries can occur for a number of reasons. It's not always just technique, all right? Sometimes, and that Bunbury Festival under 16s often sits right in the middle of growth spurts. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a number of bowlers had to either stay at the camp but not fit enough to bowl to finish the camp, or got injured and had to go home and replacements had to be called in. Bony injuries. Now, I have not been contacted once, and I suspect, and I might be wrong, that there's not much communication about each of those players, 60 odd players that have got selected for that festival, which is a prestigious festival. And if you're a player that gets selected in that, it's massive. It's really important, and it's a privilege. You get given all this kit with the 3 lines on and stuff. But it's full on, and it should be. It's full on festival. It's lots of cricket workshops. There are fitness tests. The ECB do it properly. Like there's master classes, and obviously playing cricket and stuff as well. Real insights into the next kind of level in terms of capturing data and all sorts of things. And I might be wrong, but I certainly wasn't contacted by any county or even somebody from ECB. They might not even know I'm working with players, to be honest, and that's fair enough. But I'd be really curious to find out what conversations took place before that festival around, okay, we really like this player, this bowler. We need to know what their acute and chronic workloads are leading into this Bunbury Festival. And we want to work with the county and work with the player, making sure that they are hot, fresh, ready to go, as opposed to spiking massively at all. And if a bowler has spiked big time before the festival even starts, that's a real issue. So I don't know. There's always context, and I think that when you're talking about, Bunbury Festival, we're talking about potential future England players here. I don't know what conversations take place. They might well take place, but the fact that there are at that festival, and there are still a lot of bony injuries, back injuries, leg injuries, all sorts of things, kind of suggests to me that there might not be communication. You know, how do we know that this bowler is okay to bowl 20 in a day, 15 in a day, however many number of overs they need to in a 3-day game? How do we know, given that they're going to be staying overnight, that that bowler is fresh, energized? But this whole, so I don't know, and that's just that. Yeah, I'm just curious as to that. Nobody's reached out to me, including any county academy directors, um, which I find interesting. But like I say, they might not even be aware that I'm doing any work with any of these bowlers. But I think it's a shame, because when you're talking about bony injuries, you're actually talking about, a minimum of 6 months out, depending on the extent of the injury. So bony injuries, um, and when you talk about workloads, I like to view workloads as an opportunity to get better, as opposed to restrictive. All right. Um, People often look at workloads as, well, they need to bowl more, need to bowl. Yeah, they do. If you're not bowling, you're not improving. But there is a sweet spot that every bowler needs to stay within. So let's say, in a week, a sweet spot for a bowler, let's say, is 20 to 30 overs per week. And if you stay within that sweet spot, everything's good, because the body is conditioned to bowl that amount of overs, 20 to 30 in a week. If you go 50% above, so if you go to 40, or if you go below 10, it's a red zone. If you go above 50% or below 50% of your upper and lower sweet spots, it's a red zone, because if you go below, your body starts deconditioning. It becomes softer, it becomes weaker. And if you go above, that's a spike, because if you're still playing the same amount with a spike, 150%, your body isn't used to that load. Okay. If you're still playing the same amount, it would need more recovery. And then we start going into the whole area of growth spurts. So bones are growing. It doesn't mean bowlers need to stop bowling. However, when bones are growing, the consideration is that I like to keep things really simple. So we've got our sweet spot, number of overs, acute and chronic. Chronic is the average weekly over a course of a month. The acute is the number of overs per week, and there's a correlation between the two. When we start talking about bowling days, so I like to keep things really simple, as you know, 7 days in a week, ideally maximum number of bowling days, 4 overs in the week, and ideally no more than 2 back-to-back bowling days. 7-4-2. When you start talking about growth spurts, the consideration has got to be not necessarily to bowl less on a bowling day, but you give more recovery time. So you might go 7-3-1, 7 days in a week, drop it to 3 bowling days in that week, but you never go back to back bowling days. So bowling stresses bones. Bones like being stressed, because with the right amount of recovery, it adapts and grows back stronger. Okay, even when it's growing. But without the right amount of recovery, rest, non-bowling days, bones just get stressed, and there's no recovery, and there's no adaptation, there's no getting stronger. And you can imagine what happens if you keep bowling and they keep getting tired, and the bones start barking and you ignore it. And unfortunately, it starts splintering, and that's when we start seeing stress fractures. And I am very clear now that there's a couple of things. There needs to be Communication. What is this bowler doing? Because a talented bowler is in demand, right? You've got not schools at the moment because it's school holidays, but you've got counties, you've got clubs, age group and senior teams, and you've got like representative teams, coaches wanting these players to play as well. The person right in the middle of all this is the player. So sometimes there's got to be some tough calls. Sometimes clubs have to accept that the player cannot play as a bowler because they need rest. Sometimes players cannot play at all because they've played midweek for their counties. The person right in the middle of all this is the player. And then outside, you've got the coaches and parents. Or that ideally, the structure is all communicating. The player doesn't need to know about that communication necessarily, but outside there's this communication and there's some decisions being made on what is in the best interest of this bowler. Right, they've already bowled 3 times this week. What we know they've got next week is they've got 4 days of bowling. So actually, he's not going to play on Saturday or Sunday because he needs to rest. He or she needs to rest. Needs to get the right amount of recovery, good nutrition, good sleep, good hydration, maybe do some yoga, swimming, bike session or whatever. I sense that there's a real issue at the moment. Boney injuries. I believe that for the large majority, they are preventable. Not wholly, but large percentage. And soft tissue injuries are absolutely preventable. That's the way somebody trains. Where are they strong? Are they flexible? Nutrition has a massive part to play in all of this because when somebody's going through a growth spurt, you have to have your leafy greens. You have to have the right nutrition. Leafy greens give minerals, nutrients that go straight to the bone to help the health of the bone. And I've worked with some players that actually, don't eat veg, don't like the taste of it. Well, I'm sorry. I mean, there's some decent alternatives these days, like greens powders and stuff, but you cannot replace whole foods fresh. Anyway, Isaac, have you got any questions before I have to stop this call? I just wanted to hop on really and just talk about bony injuries because there seems to be a hell of a lot at the moment. And I have no doubt at all there's maybe a lack of knowledge, a little bit of selfishness in there around like placing demands on players with no awareness of what they have done over the last month. So their chronic load and the last week, their acute load. And I think it's a real issue because as soon as a bowler, if they do get a bony injury, a minimum of 6 months out, there's 6 months, let's say, of no bowling. There's 6 months of deconditioning, 6 months of softening of the bone, tendons, all sorts of things. Have you got any? And it's a real issue. So I'm all about preventing, not wrapping bowlers in cotton wool, but being very sensible. 7-3-1 during a growth spurt, I think, is a sensible starting point. Isaac, any questions before I got to go and cut the grass? I'm sorry to have interrupted your work. If you got no questions, that's fine. Hopefully, I've created a little bit of thought. If anybody, because I'll share this over different platforms. If anybody has a current bony injury, or knows somebody that has, then reach out to me because I'm very clear on how we can use workloads as an opportunity to navigate through the the challenge of growth spurts. But if you're not bowling, you're not improving. So I am one where, no, you keep bowling, but this is a bowling day. This is what it looks like. And then you're not bowling for 2 or 3 days after that. Navigating through, I think there's a certain amount of selfishness. Now, you've got to play in this team because it's a really important match. But actually, the most important person is the player. Because if it goes wrong for that player and they're out of it for 6 months to a year, it's a long way back. Imagine a whole year of no overs, no stressing the body. You're basically starting back from square one. Okay, Isaac, get back to your work. Whatever you're doing, you, especially Isaac, thanks for hopping on. Never take this stuff for granted. Whatever you're doing this weekend, take care. Have a great one. They're nearing the business end of the season, so hope it goes really well. Catch you later.